here we are. So I'm formally welcoming Professor Sebnem, who was at the IMF, and I take pride that IMF people are there everywhere in the world, and I was there too myself, and so happy that we could invite her, and much more happy that she accepted our invitation. And it so happens that today is a day I did not know that this will be a day of full of turmoil with Trump administration coming out with their tariff war sheet and which nobody can understand. And that makes life of Professor Sebnem all the more difficult and challenging. As we all know, that EGROW Foundation is a research-based policy think tank set up in 2018, been playing an important role in policy making in our country. Today is the 270th 270 webinar that we are having today. We have had the privilege of hosting Nobel laureates. Actually, 2 weeks from today, again, we are having James Robinson, the 2024 Nobel laureate, come and speak. And 2 weeks back, we had Professor from, again, Nobel laureate from MIT come and speak on power and democracy. We have had 5 Nobel laureates come and speak to us. We have participated in the G20 when India was in the presidency and did 21 webinars for them, including climate change, new international economic order, with which me and Sebnem are very familiar, and women empowerment. As we all know, the tariff war is moving the world. It's more terrific than the war in Europe or Middle East, and it is going to engulf the whole world. So we thought this is very timely, and we approached Professor Sebnem, who kindly agreed. To chair the session, we have Professor Mohanty, who in our own country is a trade expert, and he works at the Research and Information System for Developing Countries. He agreed to chair it, and Professor Sebnem is giving her remarks. Today, she's short of time, so we'll cut the seminar short. She is a professor of economics at Brown University and the director of the Global Linkages Lab. And this tariff war, I think, will go into multiple rounds, and the contagion is going to be very devastating. Which round, who will get engulfed, we have to wait and see. She is the co-editor of the American Economic Journal, Macroeconomics. She also serves at the economic advisory panels of the New York Fed Reserve and the Bank of International Settlements. A long list of things to her credit, but the most important thing to my mind, she was the senior policy advisor and assistant director at the International Monetary Fund. As she just mentioned, she is from Turkey. She is the first Turkish social scientist who has received the Marie Curie IRG Prize in 2008 for her research on European financial integration. Her research focuses on global trade and financial linkages and economic fluctuations and growth. With this, over to Professor Mohanty. You're chairing the session. Over to you for your chairman remarks, and then we move on to Professor Sebnem.
Thank you, Professor Charan Singh. This is really very interesting phase that we are in a most challenging time. The webinar is organized at a time when the world economy is actively engaged in tariff war debate, which President Trump invoked during his election campaign. The recent pronouncement on 2nd of April is not a very surprise to the world economy. We all expected that. But the question is that how and what number would come for different countries. The reciprocal tariff formula is again extremely amazing for all of us. And the estimation of reciprocal tariff is no way related to trade. Trade deficit as a percentage of the total export of the partner country to US, and half of it is the tariff, is the reciprocal tariff. So it has nothing to do with the existing tariff. Now, the question is that these numbers which President Trump always raised, 60%, 100%, 200%, I think US laws are very tight on those issues, particularly laws like International Emergency Economic Power Act or Section 338, maximum president can raise up to 50%. So far, the 60 countries that he has already outlined in the executive order of 2nd of April, maximum up to 49%. So it may so happen that for other countries, it may go beyond that limit. In that case, how President Trump would really react is a major question. Now, for India, it is a 26% tariff. Now, with the 26% tariff, how you have to really build the entire tariff schedule for 5,222 products at 6 digit, or if it is at the national line, how you have to define is a major task for US and for India to solve it. And US has to do it for all more than 220 countries. So how they have to do it when you have to include not only ad valorem tariff, but you have to also include different waivers that you have offered to different sectors like pharma, mineral, fuel, and others. Now, another important task is that US MFN import weighted tariff was nearly 2.6%. But now, for example, India, from 2.6% to 26%, how exporters again to access market of US, do they have that much of leverage of accessing and also doing some gainful trade with US? That's also another important aspect. Now, what President Trump did, it is all for America First policy, and to reduce the expanding trade deficit, and also give some kind of a cushion to their own people. But is it that going to happen for America with a 25% tariff on the intermediates, particularly iron and aluminum? Can American firms have a profit with a very least price and can win over so many competitors globally? That is also very important. The short point I just wanted to say that US has to improve its competitiveness. We recently did a very extensive study in with our Ministry of Commerce, and where we try to see that in most of the sectors, whether broad sectors at the section level or at the chapter level, in most of the cases, we have got strong competitiveness and a trade surplus with the US. In agriculture, if you look at primary sector, in agriculture, in all 4 HS sections, we have trade surplus. And in minerals, huge trade deficit, but India is having intra-industry trade where India is exporting and also importing from US. In the manufacturing sector, all sectors, it is all trade surplus with that of India. With that kind of situation, is it that possible that US can really maintain? We also try to see that in different groupings, particularly using broad economic classification, we try to see that in the primary sector, it is yes, US has trade surplus, but in the manufacturing sector, particularly in the intermediate and also final goods, in all segments, whether it is a semi-processed or parts and components or final consumer goods or final capital goods, in all segments, India has got a trade surplus. So now the question is that how, by imposing such tariff rate, US can reverse the whole process. Nowhere in the annals of economic theory, through tariff management, you can improve your competitiveness. So if Trump is very much fascinated by such kind of policy, I think that you have to rethink and you have to think it otherwise. So now, very challenging thing, and you are having more challenging issues than us. So now, Professor Sebnem, the floor is yours. I don't want to cut your time. Floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be here. So, before going to the Trump administration formula and what does this mean for different countries, including India, I first would like to start by saying, by debunking this whole notion that a trade deficit is a bad thing, and every country should aspire to get a trade surplus and with a low value currency so that the country can be competitive. This is 200 years ago. This type of mercantilism tried to develop a mercantilist idea through some protectionist policies. This is just the old world. We don't live in that world. Okay, let me first just be very clarified. We don't live in that world anymore because of two reasons. First, because we understand this is not how the world works. I mean, we now have better economic theory to understand that trade deficits is not about just having a trade deficit today and having a trade surplus tomorrow. Trade deficits are persistent, right? I mean, that realizing the persistence of trade deficits made us realize there is some other macroeconomic fundamentals behind the trade deficit. US trade deficit has been going on since the time of Ronald Reagan. So it is not something that it just happened overnight, right? Similarly, there are countries with surpluses for a long time. So it is, of course, true there are going to be countries on both sides, but trade deficits and trade surpluses reflect other macro fundamentals in the country. Very simply, as we all well know from the national income account identity, the trade deficit, X minus M, exports minus imports, equals saving minus investment, right? This is not an equation we debate. This is not an equation we can come up, oh, it is right or wrong, because it's not an equation, it's an identity. If you write down a country's output, GDP, has to be equal to sum of its consumption, its investment, its government spending, it is export, and then minus its imports, then you rewrite that equation and you will end up with this identity which says export minus imports has to be equal to saving minus investment. And that explains the persistence of trade deficits over time, right? Why trade deficit if you have exports minus imports negative, you have a trade deficit. The other side of that equation is going to tell the saving minus investment also negative. What does it mean? That means in your country, if you're a trade deficit country, in your country, saving is lower than investment. What does it mean? That means your own citizens want to consume more. They want to save less and they want to consume more to the extent that their saving rate is lower than the investment rate. Okay, who is doing that investment? Foreigners. So if you're a trade deficit country, that means your citizens consuming more. That consumption has to come from another country. Another country is delivering those goods to you to consume. How do you, pay for that? Well, because you get this investment in your country. The foreigner savings coming to your country because your own citizens don't save that much. They prefer consumption. So foreigner saving coming to your country, and that finances your investment. Foreigners invest in your companies because your companies are more productive. So this is why trade deficit persists, and the other side is the similar, right? I mean, then I would give an example of China. Those citizens are actually low consumption, high saving. So in that case, they have high savings, and those savings come to the United States companies. So in that sense, we have always, we should think the two sides of this. That means if you're a country running persistent trade deficits like US, that's because your own citizens save less, consume more, but that means you get all the world saving to your country, which turns into investment into your companies, and that, of course, backed by the fact that your companies are more productive than the world's companies. So nothing bad here. So you cannot say good or bad here. So this is not something that you can, put a black and white box, right? This is, reflecting your macro fundamentals and your own citizens' preferences. Now, starting from this point, of course, you can, as a policymaker, you can take a perspective where, I actually don't like this. I actually want a trade surplus because I want my citizens to save more, consume less, and I want to produce more here, and I want to sell my products to other countries, and I want to make money from them. Okay, that's, then the China example. Say US wants to do that. There are other ways of doing that. You can incentivize the saving. If you want your citizens to save more than the investment rate in your country and consume less, you can think about policies like that. Or if you want to produce some goods that are not produced in your country that you buy from other countries, then you can have industrial policies that designed to increase that production. Still, you don't do it with a tariff, because a tariff is a distortive tax. It is a tax. It is a distortive tax for everyone, for your own country and for the other countries. And at the end of the day, we know very well from the literature, in fact, a very famous economist from your country, Geeta Gopinath, FTMD at IMF, her research shows very clearly that tariffs 100% pass through at the end. I mean, sometimes less than 100% depending on the exchange rate reaction, but they do always pass at the end to the consumers of that country, of the tariff putting country. You put a tariff that is going to be passed to your consumers pay for that tariff. Okay. So now let's come why US doing this. Nobody has any idea. We don't understand why United States is doing this because there is overwhelming evidence that trade deficit is not a bad thing for United States. It is, backed by the fact that it is the US citizens' preferences, because they say they prefer to save less and they want to consume. It is going to be, if it is tariff put, it is going to hurt at the end, again, US consumers. So why would you do it? Why, as a leader, you self-sabotage your own consumers, your own citizens, and your country's growth? Now, this is the second dimension when I said we are not living in the 200 years ago's mercantilist world. In today's world, trade is vertical. It is through supply chains. It is not I buy avocado from you and I sell a car to you. That is not the trade. Today's trade is through pipes, plastics, steel, aluminium, copper, glass, the side pipe of an airplane, things like that. I mean, the trade, especially between Canada, Mexico, and United States, is completely like this. There are several parts exchanging during the same day between Mexico, Canada, and US because they have a trade agreement. And as you know, in this tariff war, which is now a global war, no country is spared, including Mexico and Canada. So then, why you do this? Nobody understands why any leader would do this. The administration believes this is about the jobs. This is about bringing manufacturing to the United States. This is about, gaining those lost jobs in the manufacturing sector in the United States to other countries, to foreign countries. This is also wrong. Again, goes back to the vertical nature of the day. How are you going to bring those jobs back? How are you going to create all those factories and all those companies overnight? Say you are going to do it like over 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. That's not even going to work, because to be able to restart all those businesses, you will still need the parts. You will still need the parts. Even you want to start like gazillion different, clothing stores and, shoe stores, car store. I mean, whatever. You are still going to get the parts from other countries. So it is definitely not something that is going to bring the job back. In fact, it is going to lead a recession. You are going to lose jobs because it's going to lead a recession. It is going to be inflationary because you are making every part now more expensive. So there's going to be this cost effect. And you are going to, end up with a slowdown economy. So, which again, to any economist who study these issues, makes no sense why administration does this. Which brings me now to my final point, to the formula. The formula is not a reciprocal tariff. Let's first be very clear on that. If you see in the formula administration put out there, it is exports minus imports in the numerator, and the denominator, there are two elasticities, epsilon and phi, times imports. Those elasticities, one of them is the price elasticity of import to tariff. So basically, for any given tariff, how much import price going to respond? That's the first number, which they use wrong, right? They are using a 0.25. The authors of that paper said, well, that's not 0.25, that's 0.97. In fact, one of the authors of that paper is, I believe, actually, that's also Geeta Gopinath's paper with Brent Nyman, I believe, who used to be at the Treasury. So they use that number wrong, and that's that elasticity. And then there's this other elasticity that is 4. So that's why when they multiply those numbers in the denominator, it becomes -1. And that 4 elasticity comes from the trade literature, what we call trade elasticity, and that's how much you are going to exchange goods. So when I make the Chinese goods more expensive, how much U.S. consumers stop, consuming Chinese goods and then switch to U.S. goods, that elasticity. Okay, and then they take that 4. We know that in the short run, that elasticity is very low. It's like around 0.6. It's not 4. In the long run, it can be 4. But in the short run, again, this goes back to the supply chains again. In the short run, you cannot substitute anything that quickly. which is why there's going to be this jump in the prices. It's going to be inflationary. But just given what they did, if you take that formula, export minus imports in the numerator, denominator, those two numbers, 0.25 times 4, which is -1, and then the import number, then the formula becomes import minus exports divided by imports, right? So formula basically becomes a formula that they can create numbers on countries that they have the highest bilateral deficit, right? The formula immediately going to be the minus version of the country, because it's a ratio where they have the highest bilateral trade deficit. That's why China gets very high at the top, but also all those other smaller Asian countries, even before, I mean, you have a high number, India, but Cambodia, Vietnam have higher numbers than you. And that's exactly how Turkey is a low number, right? Turkey has only 10%. Why? Because Turkey is a very, very, very small part. Turkey's trade is with Europe, not with US. So it is basically a formula that literally takes the other side. Okay, I'm going to look at my trade deficit, and I'm going to look at my trade deficit. How much of that trade deficit comes from China? How much of that comes from Cambodia? How much of that comes from India? And I'm going to invent a number. So I'm going to punish those countries. So I'm going to revert those deficits, right? So that's what the formula does. Again, I mean, it is. I don't think it's going to go anywhere, and this is all assuming these tariffs go. They are implemented. It looks like China one is going to be implemented, because we just heard today China match it, and then now US will tell again. So my sense is from this point on, we should stop thinking this is just a threat. Let's go to the negotiating table. Let's give what the Trump administration wants, so the lower the number. I mean, of course, you know, I can say this easily. I'm an academic. It is much harder for the policymakers of India or policymakers in Germany to say that. I understand that. But at this point, I think we should, you know, go to the second phase of this global trade war started, which is aimed to dismantle the globalization. I think this is what this is about. This whole thing is about, you know, not just closing the US trade deficit by punishing those countries that has the highest share in terms of bilateral in that trade deficit, because that's not going to work. We know that's not going to work. So it is really about making the world a closed world. So really wreck the globalization, basically dismantle everything we know since the Second World, in fact, the First World War, because there was this interruption between the two world wars because of Great Depression, which, by the way, became a depression because of a tariff war like that. The Smoot-Hawley Act in 1930s deepened the depression, and that deepening of depression, of course, passed to Europe, and that is what pushed Hitler, and then that is basically the prelude to the Second World War. So if this goes on like this is I'm afraid this can be really lead to another war. This is a very, very serious global trade war. So I think at this point we should really think in terms of the second phase of this, and you know, start asking ourselves, what can the other countries do? What can the other countries do to really prevent this from happening? Because yes, true, US has a very important role in the global system. It's a very large market. It is the issuer of the global reserve currency. These are all correct, but the rest of the world together is also a big force. This is a system not run by just one country. So Europe is as big of a market. China also has a big weight. So in that sense, I don't think US single-handedly can dismantle the system. Can push it very, very far to dismantle it, but it's not, the other countries are not silent players here. But one by one they are, because one by one they are small. But if they come together, then I think they also have something to say here, which is, I think, how the other countries should think. Because clearly, Trump administration is not just going to use this as a threat. Okay, let me stop here. I have very limited time, and maybe I get some questions.
Thank you very much for a very insightful presentation. I completely really agreeing with your point that how beautifully you explained why trade deficit going through 2 and 3 gap models. Very rightly have said, and definitely such measures cannot create jobs or industrialization in the US. That is not possible. And also very interestingly, you also mentioned about the formula used for arriving at these numbers. But the only thing is that now with this, is it possible that US administration can prepare detailed tariff schedules for individual countries? And how that is possible with this kind of formula that they have used? Second issue is that, do you think that now with the different countries with the different types of tariff structure, should we think that now end of WTO? So how we have to really or WTO without the US? And the third question is about that. You see, most of the major countries are subject to tariffs. So now, uh, what countries are left is small countries. So ultimately, the high tariffs that the larger countries are going to face, and smaller countries will not be affected to that extent. So in that case, what is the intention of US that it is going to trade with the smaller countries, leaving aside the bigger ones? So these are some of my thoughts of just now. I think I can
let
take a
me let
couple
me
of.
answer this very quickly. First of all, the entire the questions about the WTO and global governance. So that's, this is not my research area, but very important. I think these are very important questions. I mean, WTO obviously right now is a complete lame duck because US made sure of that. US is the one that kind of made WTO ineffective. WTO has to come back for sure. But if US doesn't want to be part of it, then the other countries should do it. But somehow, all sorts of these global governance, multilateral institutions type of research, very important. I don't do research, but I think that is something a lot of people need to work on that and to figure out how the other. So I'm putting this all under the umbrella of how the other countries can come together. And here, a big role, of course, goes to Europe. I hope Europe can get their act together immediately. Immediately. There is no time to lose. This is unfortunately a problem of Europe that goes back now over a decade, as you know, caused a crisis among themselves. They just cannot come together because they are not a fiscal union. They just cannot come together. There are many, many disagreements. But this is the time now. Leave those disagreements aside and come together. Europe really, really has to show leadership here. If Europe cannot do that, Canada. If Canada cannot do that, India. If not, Japan. I don't know. But all that has to be done. I can only talk to an economics of it. Your second question, economics of it. How, they can even do it. Yeah, you're of course right. These country by country thing is not going to work. Small countries cannot afford this. Cambodia is going to be erased from the face of the world if there is a 97% tariff on Cambodia. So what is going to happen, of course? All those countries are not going to come back and say, what do you want us to do? They will do something Trump administration wants, and then the tariff is going to be removed. I think that's what's going to happen with small countries, because for small countries, it's an existential thing, right? It's a huge crisis. For the large countries, of course, you are not going to disappear, right? You can survive this. So that depends on your politician. I don't know. I'm sure small countries are going to go to the deal table with Trump. For large countries, I frankly don't know. I don't know what you are going to do. That's a decision for your policymakers. All we saw today is China is definitely not doing that, which we knew. That's not a surprise because this entire thing is about the economic competition between US and China. This entire thing is about that. So China obviously not coming to any type of deal table. So we'll see how that plays out. For all the other large countries, it is a decision your policymakers will make. I have no idea, but I hope it will be a decision on the part of the large countries. These guys can look in the mirror at the end of the day. That's what I will say. But it is time for some global governance and global leadership, definitely. And because US is not doing that. The US is actually working exactly to destroy all the global governance, global multilateral institution, everything. All of us worked so hard in the last 50 years. Go ahead.
Thank you. There are many questions in the box, but I would pick up a couple of questions. I would like to invite Mr. Dr. Vijay to put his question. Dr. Vijay?
Mr. Mohanty, when he's joining, can I quickly ask a question?
Yes, please. Please go ahead.
Professor Sebnem, you have been at the multilateral institution at a very senior level, and you've been at the World Bank too. So my question to you is, according to you, in the new international economic order, which you are trying to say we need it now, how much of role existing IMF and the World Bank can play? They're sitting next to the White House. Second, a quick question. According to your calculations, by when do you think the contagion of recession would reach a level where most of the countries, including India, which is way ahead, way different from Europe and UK, get into this recessionary phase? Do you have some time frame in mind?
Yes. So our models. Okay. First of all, the multilateral institutions, I think they are in a tough spot. I mean, I believe okay, I don't think they can do anything right now because they're obviously in the US next to the White House. What they can do is use their knowledge. Multilateral institutions, both IMF and World Bank, has an immense accumulation of knowledge and very, very capable people. So they have to just explain how bad these tariffs are, why they are not going to work, why it is bad for United States. And I think that all they can do is you really share your knowledge with the rest of the world. In terms of the your other question, which is, again, remind me your second question.
The contagion, the recession that would travel across the planet.
Okay. The recession is okay. So what our model, basically predicts, recession is basically very close. First in US, later than the other countries, of course. I mean, for the other countries, recession is going to depend if these tariffs are going to stay this high or not, right? And again, the other countries can go to the negotiation table with the Trump administration, so we don't know what is going to happen. But for US, it is definitely coming. So right now, if you see what is happening in the last 2 days, recession probabilities went from 20% to 60% in the financial markets. So I think the US, the critical thing is, really that is going to trigger it is the financial markets. So like when the bond markets is going to say, okay, let's just completely price in this recession risk, and then the consumers and companies slow down their consumption and investment, then we are going to start seeing the recession. This can be as quick as the next quarter or the other quarter. It is also going to pass, because I think a lot of people right now is waiting, okay, how much this is going to be reverted? How much is going to be taken back? And that depends, of course, how many of these countries go to the negotiation table. I expect all the small countries, of course, to do that, because it is really, really very disruptive for them, but we'll see what the large countries will do. Now, there's an interesting result from our work. Even all these tariffs taken back, and this is good news for all of you, bad news for the United States. This is why I think it is really the unbelievably self-inflicted thing, like never seen before. If all the tariffs taken back, say in a week from now on, Trump administration comes and say, okay, I got all the things I wanted from all the countries, I'm removing all the tariffs. The other countries will be fine, but there's going to be damage to US. US still, in that calculation, in our work, doesn't go into recession, but there's a slowdown, and there is because consumers are already starting pricing in this tariff threat, and also there is a dollar depreciation in that way, not an appreciation but a dollar depreciation. So still, this is going to hurt the United States, even all the tariffs are taken back.
Professor Sebnem, okay. One very interesting question by Deepak. When Prime Minister Modi visited Washington recently, there was an agreement between the US and India to have a Mission 500. So that is nothing but only bilateral FTA. The question is, what is the difference between BTA versus reciprocal tariff, with example that why India wanted BTA? Because there is no compromise when there is reciprocal tariff. And in BTA, you promise that you want to reduce tariff. So what is your comments on that?
Okay, so again, I'm going to repeat. This is not a reciprocal tariff. This is not a reciprocal tariff. They made up a formula because they want to punish the countries that have the largest share in their trade deficit. So it is a formula done, literally hit one by one every country in terms of how much of the bilateral deficit is contributing to overall trade deficit. It is not an optimal tariff. It is not a reciprocal tariff. Let me be very clear on that. Second, India. I think India has a very important role here because India is a large country and India can also trade with other countries. And India is obviously at its phase where it's growing a lot. So I think this is a very, very good time for India. All I can say for India is I hope your policymakers discuss with economists before doing any deal with Trump. All I'm going to say is this, and I'm going to leave it at that because I have to go.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I will just pass on
Thank
to Professor Charan Singh for the closing remarks.
Yeah, Professor Sebnem, thank you so much. There were
Thank you
so
so
many
much.
questions.
Thank you.
If you look at the questions in the chat box, there's so many of them, but I know you're short of time and especially short
Yeah.
because of the situation today. Want to
Yeah.
really thank you to accommodate us in your busy schedule. I
Thank
want
you.
to thank the panelists. I want to thank the chair. I want to thank people who are asking questions. Sorry, Sebnem is in a hurry. Next week, we have Article 4 discussion, the IMF report, which has been prepared on India and released only recently. The team from IMF in Washington is going to be discussing this. I would invite all of you to be there. And week after that, we have the Nobel laureate coming and speaking to us on institutions, professor from Chicago, James Robinson. Please stay tuned to our announcements at EGROW. And once again, Sebnem, thanks a lot and hope to look up when I am in Boston because I was there at Harvard at Kennedy School and hope to see you or when I am in Washington to catch up with you. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much.